Okay.
All right, gotcha. So yeah, welcome everyone for Early Discourse Career Day. Today we are privileged to have a guest with us. Let us welcome her with the hand of applause. And we have our CEO, and Dr. Nathaniel Dunigan, and our chef, Dickens. Hi, Dickens. And we have our intern supervisor. Then we have Uncle Tom, our chief of staff, and then we have Tony, our accountant, who will be joining us in just a few seconds. So yeah, I'm going to welcome Susan to give us an opening prayer right now, and then we shall proceed with the presentation from the musical team, Jesse and his team. Thank you.
Let's humble ourselves for a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for everything you've done for us. We thank you for the gift of life and for the air we breathe and for everything that you've provided to us. Please, Lord Father, let everything that is being taught to us during this meeting, let it just not stop here, but let us use it in our day-to-day life. And let's love what we are going to hear. In Jesus' name I've prayed.
Amen. Thank you so much, Susan, for the wonderful prayer. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow us to have a presentation from Jesse and the team. And Jesse, do you want to tell us about the song today we have? Please come here and speak loudly.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, hello.
We are gonna sing Lord, I lift your name on high by Don Moen.
Amen.
Okay. So we're going to start. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lift your name on high. Sing your praises.
Lord, I love to sing your praises. So glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save. I'm so glad you came to save. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, for joining in with this wonderful song. At this juncture, allow me welcome intern Nathalan's Ruth to introduce to us our guest that we are honored and humbled to have this afternoon. Welcome, Ruth.
Hello. So allow me to introduce Dr. Kathryn Bingham. Dr. Kathryn Bingham served in executive roles in business and nonprofit settings, leading both large and geographical dispersed teams. Kathryn's expertise spans multiple functions across the domains of government, business, higher education, and nonprofit sectors. She led strategy development, organizational change, and business turnaround efforts, and has provided recognized thought leadership in the areas of corporate leadership, development, and talent management. Kathryn's work in this area has been featured as best practice in corporate executive board case studies, and she has presented at the international conferences of the International Leadership Association and Academy of Management. Kathryn completed her executive MBA at Pepperdine University's Graziadio School of Business and Management, and her PhD in leadership at the University of San Diego School of Leadership and Education Sciences. She brings multiple coaching methods to support her clients, including leadership, appreciative inquiry, and stakeholder-centered coaching. Her ongoing research focuses on transformative experiences in the leadership development journey of business professionals. Dr. Kathryn Bingham proudly served in the United States Marine Corps LEADistics LLC is a certified woman-owned small business and a veteran-owned small business based in the Charleston, SC area. And just for fun, you should know that Kathryn is a lifelong Dodgers fan. Now that attending home games involves a cross-country flight, you'll find her watching the Boys in Blue live at least once a year at the closest MLB stadium. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, Kathryn.
Well done.
Thank you. Just a minute. Ruthie, we didn't get to see you. Can you come back to the camera so we can at least see your face?
Good job, Ruthie.
Welcome.
Okay, so give me a moment. I'm going to share my screen. So you should be able to see my screen now. Has it appeared for you?
Yes, it is.
Awesome. So notice I titled this conversation because I want you to ask questions. And then I'm also going to prompt you a couple of times to think about what I've put on the screen. I'm going to actually ask you some questions and invite you to, if you have some paper or other things, to take some notes and write some things down for yourself. So if you're good with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So when Ruthie was describing that I live in the Charleston, South Carolina area, that's what you see behind me is marshland and the Wando River. So in the Charleston area, there's a harbor and there are 3 rivers that feed it. Now, back in the day, the conversation or the story, and stories are so important, was that the 3 rivers, the Cooper, the Ashley, and the Wando River actually created the Atlantic Ocean, right? That they were the rivers that created the ocean rather than perhaps having water flowing both ways. And what's interesting is that this is brackish water. So water comes in from the ocean. So there's a mix of salt water and fresh water in these rivers, and the tides flow in and out. And it's really quite a lovely space to live in. I mentioned, or at least in Ruthie's introduction, she mentioned we are lifelong Dodgers fans. So this is my family. There's 4 generations here, and it includes all our beloved dogs. And we are all, including the dogs, wearing Dodger gear because not last year, but the year before, the Dodgers won the World Series. And of course, we got Dodger gear for Christmas. So we took a family photo. So we wanted to make sure that, sometimes as professionals, we focus on that business side or the organizational things that we do, but it's really important to know that we are whole beings, and it's the family and the other components of our life that really make up who we are and our identities. So what I started with in our conversation today is that space that all of these things are part of us. So you notice that I have a timeline or an arrow that takes us back into my past, and it looks ahead into my future. And so when I think about the past, there are events in my life, there are experiences that I've had, there are lessons that I've taken away, education, imagination, things that I hoped for myself when I was young. And then there are things going on in my life today in the present. So Ruthie mentioned that I have LEADistics is my company. And so if you wonder about the name, take leadership and statistics and smush them together. And that's where LEADistics comes from. It's like thinking about the science of leadership and what is it that we can do to help others grow and develop in different ways. I'm also, you saw that I have a family. I have even more than that. I'll talk about it a little bit later. A Cooper River Bridge Run. So once a year, across one of those rivers, there's this giant bridge, and as many as 40,000 people come to the Charleston area to run the Cooper River Bridge Run. It's, I think, the 3rd largest of its kind, and it's a pretty fun thing. So that's coming up. I'm training for that this year. It's Saturday, April 2nd. And then I'm part of lots of communities. So that's my today. And then I have several things that come in under the future. But I'd like you to think about for a minute, what are the things that are in your past that are really important to you? What are the experiences that you've had prior to today that create for you who you are and who you want to be? And then what are the roles and the different elements in your life today that are not necessarily wholly defining, but they are a part of how you present yourself today? And then what are some of those things that are your hopes for the future? Where is it that you'd like to go? Where is it that you hope God takes you in your life past today? So just take a minute or two.
Kathryn, do you mind if I jump in real quick?
Sure.
This is great. Dora, are you hearing us well?
Yes, please. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so I hope that everyone is hearing well and understanding this is such an important thing that Dr. Kathryn is talking to us about. This, especially given COVID, the pandemic, everyone is just now going to school. Our realities are really evolving from the distant past that we all have, and then the shared past that we all have, especially in the last 2 years, and then the shared present, but the future may not be as shared. So Dora, do you think that's coming through? Is that clear?
Yes, please. Yeah, it is clear.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kathryn. Go ahead.
No worries. And so if you take, go ahead, Dora.
Yes, can you let in some our accountant? I think he's been on hold. Can you just admit him?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yep, you're right. It's up higher on the. Let's give him a second to join in. It should be there. Okay, so if you have some notes that you're taking, maybe just draw an arrow somewhat like you see here, and just jot down a note or two for yourself. This isn't for anyone else. This is for yourself to think about. What are one or two things that you have that really strike you, that shape who you are today, but come from your past? What are one or two roles that you have today in your present space that are important to you, that are an important part of your life? And maybe what's one or two things that you really think about for your future? Where do you see yourself? You can think far down the line, like what's going to happen 10 years from now. You can think what's going to happen a month or two from now. This is for you to think about it, and you can put down whatever works for you. And I'm just going to give you a minute or two to write some things down and think about what that is for you. And I can see your image. So when you feel like you've had a minute or two, just wave at me, and then I'll move on to the next piece.
So yeah, you all have your papers there, you have your notes, you have your pens. So write down what is important to you today, how you feel you are contributing, right? Is that a fair way to translate the word role?
Yep, absolutely. What are some things, who are you in what are the ways you contribute? What are those spaces that you're in? And that's kind of a funky way of putting it. You are students. That's a role that you have, right? You are leaders. That's a role that you have. But what's important is what's important to you in your role. What are those things that you feel are important, not what somebody may identify you as. They may see you as a student. They may not see you necessarily as a leader, but you are a leader, right? In your own way. Where are the places that you lead?
Exactly. So what do you like about or what your role is, and how is part of where you're going to go from here? And do I hear music or something coming in somewhere?
I think that's Tony. He should mute his microphone. Tony, please mute your microphone. Thank you.
So, Kathryn, one of the things that we have within our core principles at the Institute is that we take care of our gardens, our little gardens, because we believe that we've been given little gardens, and if we tend them properly, then they will turn into big farms. In other words, courses that we're offered expand and grow if we're keenly aware of them and respect them and do well. So I think that might be a good intersection here with this idea of role. I mean, what are the things that I'm tending to right now? And what is the big farm that I'm looking forward to one day in a metaphorical sense?
And what's nice about using gardens as an opportunity is that gardens have, number one, seasons. So sometimes we're spending a lot of time on one aspect of the garden. Maybe it's the planting, and then it takes time for whatever it is to grow, right? So let's say you're growing, and I'm going to laughingly put out tomatoes because we had a little conversation on tomatoes not necessarily growing well. But if you do plant tomato plants, it takes a while before you actually see tomatoes and they develop enough for us to eat, right? So then we have another season. So we have the season of waiting, right? And then we have the season where we can harvest, and we get to pick whatever it is, if it's a fruit or a vegetable, or even flowers that bring us joy, right? And then we enjoy them. So we have a season of enjoyment to go with that. So I know you've had a few minutes. I'm going to switch to the next slide and talk a little bit about my past. And so I think about the past as something that shapes us, but it doesn't necessarily define us unless that's a choice that we make, right? What defines us can be choice, or it can be something that's outwardly obvious, and maybe it should or should not define us, and we have to make our own way through those definitions. But I was very fortunate that I had a past history of some very strong women. My mom worked for what was Hughes and became Boeing Satellite Systems, and so she built satellites. So you think about DirecTV, you've heard about that. She helped plan, build, and launch those satellites. Before her, my grandmother worked for Rocketdyne, and she was involved with the Apollo missions to space. And before her, my great grandmother was a nurse at a time when women were not necessarily trained to do those things. And so it was very avant-garde. So that's a word that's sort of the advanced guard, forward thinking, before their time. You know, these are women that did things. And so I was really lucky to have those kinds of examples for my life. But when I was a little girl, what I really, really, really wanted to be was an astronaut. But I'm pretty sure Dr. Nathaniel could tell you there were no lady astronauts when I was a little girl. And so even though I knew that, it was something that wasn't available to me. So how did I channel those things in different ways? When I was little, I also was able to go to a unique physics program. I was in the 5th grade, and I went to this physics program that was put on by my grandmother's company, Rocketdyne, at the time. And it was amazing and fascinating. And the people were employees that were teaching literal rocket science to children. I was the youngest there, and it went up through high school. And it just opened my mind to a lot of possibilities. At the same time, I was learning language, and I was involved. The school that I attended taught Spanish, and you're required to take it like from kindergarten on. And so this dynamic of here's science and here's language, and they're very different. They use different parts of our brain. And so when we think about this, what does that mean for us when we go these different places? I lived in Southeast Asia. I lived in the Middle East. And in fact, I put this word presence on there, and I'm keeping that there for a particular reason. And I love that you are all people of faith. And so this particular word for me is when I was living in Malaysia. Sometimes we don't always know, we don't always feel in that very moment that God is with us. But there was a moment, a period of time where I was in this particular place. I was sitting by a small creek or river on some rocks. There wasn't really anyone around. And I just knew the presence of God. I knew it. I felt it. And even in times of life where things are challenging, there is that moment that I can go back to and just recreate that knowing. So sometimes, we feel like we want to have that all of the time, but sometimes it ebbs and flows in us. And that's for me, one way that I go back and create that for myself. And then in the center, I put loss. When I was young, my dad died in a plane crash, and that shaped me as well. I mean, there's all kinds of things that happened to us in our past, and I could have put 101 other things on here, but I didn't. You can't, it's like reading a book and somebody creates the movie and they can't put every single element that was in a very descriptive book in that movie. It's the same thing. Our lives are very full, There are a lot of things. And so what are the items we choose to put on there? Now, somebody who's in the audience, I want you to kind of look at this screen and what do you see here that maybe stands out for you? And it can be anything. There are no wrong answers here.
An astronaut.
Okay. So there's anything, it doesn't matter what you bring up. So astronaut is great. Is there anything about literally what you're seeing that strikes you as, why did she do that?
I'm wanting to jump in here, but there's a lot of background noise around my house right now.
Oh,
Are you able to hear me or
I
is
can
it?
hear you fine.
Okay, good. Okay, so when she says stands out, she's asking, is there something particularly interesting, something that you're surprised to see here, not just the words that are written on the screen, but how she has described it and described all of these things. Is there something that is interesting to you? And if so, what question do you have about it?
Can I jump in as well?
Sure.
I see a strong woman who has accomplished her life for sure. I see that there is loss in the middle of everything, and I'm so interested to know why Iran and Malaysia.
Okay.
Why not some other country or some other continent? Why specifically that? That is very interesting.
Okay.
And I see a woman that is still present. That's what I can see.
Very nice. Very nice. So again, there's no wrong answer. One of the things that I did on this slide, and I want you to think about it when you see other people sharing information with you. Notice what's on here. It's all words. There's no pictures on this slide. It's just all words. And I've made them a little bit different, right? Some are stronger, some are bolder, some are less bold, some are a little bit smaller. And whether that means anything or not, just think about when you see presentations, what is it that not only did they share with us directly, but is there anything missing? Or is there anything different about how they've done it? And does that have any meaning? It may or may not when you see it with somebody else. But I very intentionally did this because I am a word person, right? I use a lot of words. And of course, we had to in our doctoral program. We read a lot of words and we had to write a lot of words. But the idea is I communicated this in words because words are something that come very naturally to me. Now, just to quick answer your question, our family was in the Peace Corps when we went to Malaysia. And then we weren't when we went to Iran. I actually graduated high school in Iran at an American school that was in Shiraz. And my stepdad, this was back in the time when the Shah was in power, and he set up the drafting department and the computer science area of Iran electronics industry. And that was how we got there. So it was just a different space and time. So what I'm going to do is
I'm sorry, Dr. Kathryn, I'm sorry.
Sure.
I just want to interrupt again for just a minute. I'm sorry.
No.
But with we've had Peace Corps volunteers who've actually lived and worked with us, but I think it's been many, many years. And so I'm just wondering if anyone of the current interns even know what the Peace Corps is? Does anyone know? If not, again, it's not your fault.
No.
No. Okay. So can you help them understand what Peace Corps is briefly?
Sure. So the United States government creates, I would say it's a volunteer corps. You volunteer to participate and you bring certain skills, and then they send you as Americans to a country to pass on knowledge or skills in a particular area. So my mom, for example, taught at Mara Technology Institute in Kuala Lumpur when we went to Malaysia. And in fact, there was a, the things you remember is kind of interesting. So she was teaching, and there was this one thing that she said every day to her students. What is a reference designation? A reference designation is the name of a part or a component, right? And it was going to be on the test, and she talked about it every day with her students. But the idea is it could be, they might teach about agriculture, they might teach about technology, they might teach about any number of things where they have knowledge and skills, and they go and they pass that on. And typically Peace Corps volunteers get a very tiny stipend, just enough to live on. And it's more subsistence than, large salaries that you might think about for if they were in the private sector. But you do it because you want to make a difference in the world. And then you come home. So does that help?
Yeah. Yes, it does. Thank you.
You bet. You bet. So I also spend a lot of time talking about journeys, and some of these things were on there. And much like the past slide, this is not a whole everything, right? It's just a part. But I was in the Marine Corps. I worked for oil exploration. I worked in computers and tech. I was a nonprofit leader for a decade. I worked in aerospace and defense, and some of the roles that I had there were finance, Six Sigma. So that's all about process improvement and continuous learning. I worked for the audit department. And then after that, I became an executive coach and worked in leadership development. So it's not 100% all the things I've done, but when we think about what our tomorrow is, there are a lot of ways we can get to where we want to be. And what I like to tell people that I coach or students that I mentor is try things, try different, make a decision and try something, and you can always change your mind, right? So I am not a brain surgeon. I could be a brain surgeon if I spent enough time and money and, invested to learn how to do it and trained under other surgeons. I could do that. That's not the path I took. But, along my way, I've done a wide variety of things, and you can make choices in life to reinvent yourself. Right? To become something different. If something's not working for you, make a pivot, turn around and do something else. It may require you to spend extra time learning something new or experiencing something to equip you for that other job or space or role that you'd like to be in. And the other thing I want you to notice is that along the bottom under the line, I didn't start out with degrees from universities. I didn't start that into my life. I had my kids. I was a working mom. And then I started getting my associate's degree, my bachelor's degree, my master's degree, and then finally my PhD. So these things didn't happen before I started working and becoming these different roles over time. They happened later in life. And then you'll also notice under the PhD that I had a cancer journey, a cancer experience. And that actually shaped where I went after the PhD. What I learned through that were, you know, where did I want to be? How did I want to spend my time? I had gone into the program thinking I would keep my feet in two spaces. I would be a practitioner and I would be an academic, and I would work maybe in a large corporation and mentor people and help grow their leadership that way. And then what I realized is that, you know, we don't know what path God is going to take us. We don't know where we're going to be. And what was most important, if I really tried to do both of those things, I would not be able to spend as much time on my health and with my family and do the things that were really important. And that was one of the reasons that I ultimately chose not to be, in a sense, in two worlds, but to focus on this element of where can I coach and mentor? Where can I help people grow their leadership? And that's why I created my small business, is to be able to do that and really focus on that as I continue on in life. And who knows where I'm going to go next. But the idea is whatever path you have as you grow and develop, you can move into different spaces, learn different things, and you can change your mind, right? You can choose for yourself.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
that's so important. Say that again. You can move into different spaces. You can change your mind. You can choose for yourself. Because in cultures all over the world, those are not options, especially for certain people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I was so excited to have you come and talk with us today. If you don't mind, before we proceed, I would really like to have everyone understand this slide that's in front of us right now, because there's so much here that I want to make sure is not being missed. I mean, there's a lot right here. So I'm sure you've mentioned it, but I'm sure that no one else knows the acronym or the USMC. So can you tell us more about the Marine Corps?
Oh, I can. So the United States has multiple branches of military service, and the Marine Corps is the smallest of them. And we will tell you that we're the best.
Now, I'm sorry, let me interrupt you again, Doctor. So military service, how would Dora or how would any of you refer to that? What is the most common word you might use to describe someone who Dr. Kathryn, the uniform that Dr. Kathryn wore?
Army. Army.
I'm not sure.
Army. Okay, yeah, something like that, right? Okay, hello?
I didn't understand the word that they're using, so.
No, but I'm saying it's right, it's correct.
Okay.
So it's like soldier, like officer, something along those lines. But then what Dr. Kathryn is telling us is that now she's describing the branches. So because here we talk about Army, but that's used simultaneously.
I get it. Okay.
Military, but in the United States we have more than the Army.
Right.
We have other branches. They do the same work. Well, I'm not going to say that, but I mean the role sounds the same. In the United States, though, as you're saying, Army. But anyway, I'm glad that everyone's connecting it to the.
Yeah. So in the United States, we have the Air Force, is a branch of service. The Army is a branch of service. The Navy is a branch of service. We also have the Coast Guard, right? And we have the Marine Corps. And now we have space, which is, but the idea is they have a different focus. You might have some crossover. So you might have pilots in the Navy and the Air Force and the Marine Corps, but the predominant service that focuses on the air would be the Air Force, right? Planes and things like that. Whereas the Navy is going to focus on serving through ships. They also have pilots, but there's crossover. So the United States Marine Corps, if you Google and learn about them, they are a much smaller force. And one of the interesting names that the branch of service the Marine Corps has is the President's Own. There's a lot of history there. And one of the things about the Marine Corps is they also tell us, and we always say, once a Marine, always a Marine. So even though you're not serving actively in the military anymore, we continue to identify as a Marine. Once a Marine, we were there, but we're always a Marine. That esprit de corps, that service that comes together with all of us together, that is something you carry forward with you in the rest of your life. So another colleague of Dr. Nathaniel and I is Marianne Waldrop, and she also was a Marine, and we continue to be friends to this day. So she lives in North Carolina. We live in South Carolina, and she was really interesting in the studies. She studied women Marine generals. There weren't very many, and she was able to interview 8 of the 9 living generals at the time she did her study. It was really fascinating. So it's just this idea, when you have that acronym there, it's bold and big for a reason, because that, even though it's way, way far in my past, it actually is a time that was very shaping for me. So I'm going to take this forward.
Thank you for that.
You bet.
Then let me just ask one more about this screen
Sure.
that's in front of me. I want to actually, I have 2 more questions that I hope that I think might need some minor clarification. We don't use the word nonprofit here.
Okay.
Does anyone know what we mean by nonprofit when we say that in American English? You may not. But if
not for money.
Yes, yes, exactly right. But there's another term we use for such an organization that is not for money. I won't be surprised if you don't know it. So it's not a test. It's not a problem. I'm just curious. Here we call it an NGO.
I was going to ask if that was where you were going to go with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So AidChild is an NGO. Ollie is an NGO. Ollie is a nonprofit. Ollie is an NGO. So when she says nonprofit, that's what she's referring to, is an NGO.
Mm-hmm. And in that particular case, I was working for an organization that was affiliated with World Vision, and it was called Love Incorporated. So the INC was in the name of Christ, but it was actually incorporated. So it was an interesting way of talking about it. And what that organization did is it created clearinghouses staffed by volunteers in communities that would take calls from families in crisis and match them with government agencies, other nonprofits, community services, and volunteers from the local churches who would help them manage through the experience that they and their families were having. So it was a really, I spent 10 years there, and it was a really important part of my life. So.
That's amazing. And, I think even maybe now more than ever after the pandemic, money is even more of a commodity than it was before, especially like here. So that beautiful intersection between purpose, meaning, and a paycheck, something that's so valuable to talk about in the context that you're presenting to us. Again, before you leave this slide, I know time is running, we don't want to take too much of your time, but before you leave this slide, I really want to also go to, I'm sorry, there's a lot of noise behind me. Are you hearing
That's okay. We hear you just fine.
Okay. Is this, if you don't mind, talking a little bit more about your cancer journey?
Okay.
Because, all of us here, we have health journeys. We're living with, we have this health issue that tries to define us.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit more about that?
In fact, that is a really important dynamic, is tries to define us. So let me start right there. So I had breast cancer, and in the United States, there is this big thing about the pink ribbon and this like fundraising machine that people use.
It's like the red ribbon for HIV.
Okay, yeah. So the idea is there's actually a lot of people for whom this idea, they're ambivalent, questioning this idea of the machine of fundraising, because the fundraising, not all of the money actually goes to individuals who are experiencing cancer. And so they do some good things. For example, the very first football game I ever went to was a Chargers game in San Diego. And I got to go because we got the tickets through USD. And it happened to be in October where they were celebrating breast cancer awareness. And the NFL, or the National Football League, does in fact do a lot for funding mammograms for women to help detect cancer early. And if you catch it early, you have a much higher likelihood or rate of survival. So here's the interesting thing for me was I went through the PhD program, and I had determined what I was going to do as my dissertation study. I had gone through the process of submitting it to the university so that I could get approval. So Dr. Nathaniel can talk about the IRB, which is the Institutional Review Board that goes through and says, yay, verily, you have a study that we're going to let you do. You've designed it in a way that is good. We're just going to leave it at that. But it's a big deal to get your IRB approval. My IRB approval hit at the same time frame that I got the call that said, oh, by the way, you have cancer. And I had to put some of what I was doing on hold, because at that time I had a couple of universities that had agreed to allow me to survey master's degree people who are in their executive programs. I was on a committee for the International Leadership Association's conference, their global conference, which happened to be in San Diego that year. And I was chairing a committee to do a silent auction to raise money. And I was teaching a leadership class for students. And so all these things, you can't, when you get that call, when you get that diagnosis, you may have to take a step back, right? It's kind of like your garden with the seasons. Sometimes there's things, you can't harvest when it's planting time. You can't necessarily harvest when you're in that waiting space for the plant to grow and develop and put the fruit on the vine, so to speak. So here I was in this time, and I had to make some real decisions about what choices would I make? What could I step away from? What would I go ahead and lean into, even though I had to guard my health and go through the process of that? So it actually was very pivotal for me to go through that experience, because I made very different choices about what might happen next in my life because I had that experience. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. So I want to come into a couple very quick slides. This is just to go into, what prompted this conversation. You were talking about, the last couple of years and the pandemic and all of the things that happened. And I wanted to really take from the big picture down to this slice for me. And I had big plans in 2021. We eased through some of the pandemic things in, and especially in our region. And I was this thing, Driving Pink. That's a book. You're going to see the cover in just a moment. I had already written the book, and I was just going through, I was going to get all the permissions for all of the research so that I could use it. You can talk about that maybe offline a little bit, because I don't want to take away space from that. I was getting all of the information for the publishing process, and I was going to have that published and out first quarter of 2021. I was really excited to, I've moved many times, and I'd carried a bunch of stuff with me that I never had time to sort through and purge and clear away the things that no longer served me or our family, and just clear those things. So I don't know if you've ever talked about that book of Marie Kondo's, The Magic of Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, right? And how you let go of things, as well as just have the things that are truly meaningful in your life. So that was part of my plan for last year. I had several digital learning. I had lots of things on my list. You can see, we talk about the fact that God laughs at us when we make plans sometimes. Right? He may have different plans, but what really happened was that in January last year, my father-in-law passed away. And that then created this entire year where I spent in the United States. Dealing with estates has all these legal and financial activities that you become immersed in. And we dealt with 3 different sets of lawyers. We dealt with, my husband was the executor. That's the person who is charged with managing the estate, but he couldn't actually do it. So it all fell to me. And I had what they call a power of attorney. So I was doing all of the things, all the stuff and activities and tracking and blah, blah, blah.
And see here, when someone dies, the family comes in, the community comes in, there's that Ubuntu reality.
Yes.
Will help.
Yes.
But in the US, it usually falls to one person.
Yeah.
I just want to give you a heads up that in 3 minutes, we are going to land at the top of the hour, and everyone's going to stand up and do a little jump, because that's what we do at the top of the hour. So don't get confused.
So let me just hit this real quick. So then because of this, I inherited people that are adults. And it just demanded all of my time. So what we plan is not necessarily what always happens to us. And so here we are now in 2022, and there's the cover to my book. It's ready to go. I have all but the last 2 permissions. One of which is, do you remember in our program, Lynn McTaggart's book on the intention experiment? So I'm waiting to be able to use a reference to the 9th chapter, which is the mental blueprints chapter. It's one of my permissions. And so I have the this year's Cooper River Bridge Run that's coming up. I am already back into that, you know, how do I get things in person? So some of the things come back from last year and are repeating that I'm getting done now. And some of them are newer. But the idea is, having got past that season, I have a lot more freedom to choose what comes next. And so with that, I think that's all I have on here. And we made it before that 3 minutes is up. So I turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Kathryn, for the wonderful presentation. And please let me give you 1 minute to stand up, just stretch a little bit, then we go into the question and answer session.
Absolutely.
Stand up.
I'm going to stand up too. So are you going to stand up? I'm watching.
Yeah.
Everybody, let's get up. We can stretch.
Okay, I guess we've got enough stretching. Yeah. No? Really?
Keep stretching if you need a little more.
Okay, so we are good to go. We should be ready. So I have with me here, first it's Naklanzi. Ruth, yeah, she reminded me that she's Ruth. Yes, Ruth, come and ask your question.
Okay. How do you transition? How do you transition from what you planned and didn't happen to reality that it didn't happen?
You know, I think what's really important is that we have to recognize that sometimes we have to let things go. And, you know, there was a person on LinkedIn who committed to making drawings every day. And one of her drawings was a person who was juggling. And there was that reminder that, you know, you could be juggling a lot of things, but some things bounce. Like if you drop it, it will bounce and it won't harm whatever it is you're juggling. And some things will shatter. They're like glass. If you drop it, if you're juggling and then you drop that thing, it might break. And my response to that is, it goes back almost like the garden. We have seasons of things. And sometimes, you know, we have to let things go because even though they're really important to us, the new thing that came, dealing with the components from the family, they were really, really, really important, right? You can't not let a person who is suffering get the medical care that they need. You can't not follow the law to do the things that were in the estate. There were timing issues where those things had to get done. So yes, did I put my book on hold? I did. It got set aside, but now's a new year and I can pick it back up. It's almost like I set it aside, I put it in a safe place, and now I'm able to bring that back into my life and work. And you know what, as soon as I get those last permissions, then it goes and publishes, and I'm free again to look at new things. I may continue to work with it for marketing and to talk about it or to share it. But the idea is there are seasons of things that we do and we do not do. And it's okay to say, I'm going to let that go for a time, or I'm going to set it aside for a time. And sometimes we set things aside and then we realize maybe it's not important enough to pick back up. Maybe the things we set it aside for stay more important.
Yeah.
right?
Preach. That has been my biggest lesson through the pandemic, is things that I thought were so important and so essential that I was willing to go to battle for, and then I lost anyway. I'm realizing that was not a good decision. Or I don't want to say it was a bad decision, but I've learned from the decision that I should not panic when the plan that is before me is not panning out. That instead I can believe in the fact that something better is in store instead of this plan.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
And we feel like it's when we invest our time in, and I'm actually mindful in the moment of your Airbnb, because every time you would get a notice that, oh my goodness, you can't, there were these contracts that we're going to wait farther, we're going to wait more before you can have your guests or you can have people traveling. And we invest our time and our energy and our passion into making some things happen, and then they don't. And we're like, so what was all that investment for? And sometimes it's an investment of the heart or the mind, and sometimes it's literal investment of time and money and things like that. I don't think we lose anything by investing heart in things that maybe don't come fully to fruition, because there's always lessons that we can learn along the way. And we can look back. The military has this great term called an after action review, right? And we can ask ourselves questions about, well, did something go as planned? Why did it, or why didn't it? What can we learn? What are the takeaways that we can learn from that experience? I think it's important for us to, what are those things in our life that at a certain space we stop and we ask ourselves the question about what did we learn from that? Did it go as planned? Could we have done better? Could we, did something happen that was surprising? What does that benefit us, or how can we learn from that surprising aspect?
Yeah, exactly. And no guilt or shame in there, just like, well, let's figure it out. And I don't think it's the Airbnb you're talking about. I think it's about our other businesses. But this pandemic totally, challenged us with all the questions you just described. Now, am I doing something wrong? Because I still can only see the shared screen.
I have to take that off. Hold on. It's
okay, good. Because as we wind up, I would love for us to be able to see you.
There you go.
There we are. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Where do we go from here, Dora?
Thank you so much, Dr. Kathryn. Yes, another question from intern Sam Tendo. Yes, is here. Speak, yes.
I do have a question. How long does it take you to change your mind to start something new?
I think it depends on what it is I'm changing my mind about, right? So some things you can make up your mind pretty quickly, right? Maybe it doesn't have as much impact, or maybe, so if I want to create a learning course, right? If I want to teach a course for women on how to position themselves to communicate well and have greater influence, and I can decide on how I want to deliver that course. Do I want to put it online? Do I want to have a workshop, right? So those are things that are fairly easy and quick to change. How do I want to deliver a course? How do I want to find the women who would participate in that course? There are other things that take a longer time, right? So going through the PhD program, that's going to take a certain amount of lining things up. You have to choose a program to be in. You have to decide, how are you going to fund that program? Where are you going? Are you going to work and go to school? Once you're in it, how are you going to do it? Are you going to go through that process? And then the decision at the end where I said I made that decision, I was actually getting offers to go back into the corporate world as I concluded my program. And it was a fairly quick decision for me to say, no, that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this. I'm going to start my own business and do something very different. Now, that doesn't mean I grew the business fast. That takes time and effort to do. But the decision around what am I going to do, that was not something that took a long time. So I think it very much depends on what part of your life you're making that decision in, and is it something that's a simple, easy decision, or is it something that's going to really take a lot of thought and effort?
Okay. Thank you, please.
Great question.
Thank you so much. We do have one more question still.
Oh, great.
From Susan.
Hi. I saw a quote about your past shapes. Not our past shapes. Not defined. What does it mean?
I'm not certain I caught all of that.
I saw a quote about our past shapes. The quote is not defined. What does it mean?
Okay, so so if I heard you right, you're asking about what does it mean to be a coach?
Well, she says she saw a quote that was on the screen. I think it's a saying that goes like, our past shapes. And does not define.
I gotcha. I got you. Our past shapes. Okay, so we have events in our life that happen, right? We have so let's say there was an earthquake around us and things occur, right? That's an event that we might experience. There might be, you know, a hurricane, so big dynamic things, or it could be small things. It could be the way our family is. It could be the people in our lives. So all of those things can shape us, but we choose how those things define us. So I choose not to be defined as a cancer survivor. I don't actually like that phrase, survivor. Like I barely survived this. I feel like we can choose to live through and thrive in.
Or that others failed when they did not survive.
Yes, yes. I feel like it's important to think about those things where people can apply labels, or even we can apply labels to ourselves, and think about what do those really mean, and are those what we want for ourselves, and how can we define ourselves differently? Like I'm not going to change the fact that I am a white woman of a certain age, right? You can see that of me, but how can I come across? How can I love? How can I appreciate? How can I use the gifts and talents that I have in ways that I choose how I can be defined? There's things I cannot change, but there are things that I can put forward as being, this is what's important for you to see about me in my life.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
This has been so wonderful. We really appreciate. Oh, thank you, Susan Gale, too. Thank you.
That's a great question. Thank you so much. And by the way, I love your t-shirt. That is a great t-shirt.
I even missed the t-shirt. What did it say?
Girl boss.
Girl boss. Arjun and Charles, yeah. And you know, she's named after my mom. My mom is Susan Gale, so she's Susan Gale. So anyway, well, Dr. Kathryn, thank you so much for this. Dora, thank you for the emceeing that you've done. I think this has been a very productive and healthy time. I hope that, and I know that these thoughts and these comments and these ideas will resonate very deeply and are important. And that's exactly what I wanted from this global discourse conversation that I wanted to invite my best friends like Dr. Kathryn into. So thank you so much. Do you have anything final you want to say, Dr. Kathryn, before we move into our final prayer?
You know, I am grateful to be a part. I want to let you know that you can always reach out, right? Reach out, ping me on LinkedIn as you grow and you create your professional spaces in the future. When you create a profile for yourself, is that common in Uganda, that they use that space? I know it's global, so, but reach out through my company. You can email me, you can ping me on Facebook. When you do so though, let me know that you're from AidChild, right? Or the Leadership Institute, because that helps me know you're not the quote unquote prince from Nigeria who's trying to create a contact, and you can explain the context of that. In other words, sometimes people are not legitimately real people, and I like to know that you are there anytime. You're welcome to reach out to me anytime, and I'm happy to answer questions that might come to mind later. It's always that after we're all done, that was a great question, I wish I had asked that.
Well, so
Afterwards, you're always welcome to send me a question and I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kathryn, for the wonderful time you've spent with us. We've really learned a lot from you. At this moment of time, allow me to welcome Susan to give us a closing prayer. Susan, thank you.
Okay. Let's humble ourselves for a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for everything that has happened. We thank you for the meeting. And we thank you for everything that is being told to us. And let everything that we've learned, we use it in our life. And we thank you for Dr. Kathryn for everything that she has taught us and her experience, everything. In Jesus' name I've prayed.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. And I pray that you have a very good time. Thank you so much, Dr. Kathryn. Thank you.